Hey guys, welcome back to the Bodhi Surfboards YouTube channel. Today Jono tells me we're on day 7 of his build, and what we're doing today is really the last stage of construction, which is trimming the rails off so Jono can start shaping. So what we're going to do is cut in between the pins on the side here. So when we put that rail on, we made sure there was a gap between the deck and the pins. We're going to cut that out with a jigsaw, basically running the jigsaw along the side. Then we're going to use the flush cut router bit, the laminate trim bit, to clean it up. And then a dodgy half round router bit that I'll show you in a little while. And then Jono's hand shaping, which is on the other side of the shop. The most important thing is your PPE. Make sure that you've got a good mask and ears, and I recommend you full on ski goggles. If you're just wearing safety glasses, they probably won't do the trick. So good PPE is really important. Nice sharp blades, all the rest of it. Let's go. Okay, so what we're going to do is use the jigsaw to cut the majority of this excess of the rail off. Now with the bottom deck it's the easiest because the deck is flat, there's no deck roll. So what we can do is use the base plate, which is engineered square, on the rail, which we have engineered square, to run along. Now what you don't want to do is to push down on the jigsaw. So the general rule in the shop is let the tool do the work. If you do the work, you're the tool. So your muscles don't matter when you're doing this. You're using the tool and all you're doing is guiding it. Things you don't want to do is to twist the blade or to flex the blade. You're literally just cruising it on a trajectory. The edge of the base plate here on the jigsaw should be on the same plane as the board. So as it rises over the board, it's going to go like that sort of shape. This doesn't want to be on this angle or flat when you're trying to go up a curve, because then you have to twist the blade and that just doesn't make sense. So I'll whack into it and we'll see how we go. So what I'm going to do is actually show you what it looks like when you force feed the blade and what it sounds like. So when the blade's running smoothly, you're feeding the blade. So it's cutting at a nice rate. You don't have to put too much pressure on it. Like I say, you're not pushing down on this, you're not pushing the board across the table, you're not twisting it, it's just running along nice and clean. If I try and go too fast, what I'll do is I'll cut normally first. This is not the best blade, so I'll change that in a second. But what I'll do is cut normally first where it's okay, and then I'll try and push too hard and you'll see the difference in the vibration, but you'll also hear it. So that's force feeding the blade. If you're doing that, you're going to cause unnecessary stress on all of your joints. Don't do it, just take your time. If you find that you're coming up, if you can just shoot in here, Jono. If you find that you're coming up in your cut, the best thing to do, I'm just going to turn this on, is to move backwards and slowly feather it in. Now the two spots that I look when I'm looking over the top is that I look at how high it is here, so I obviously don't want that to cut, and I'm looking at how high it is off the deck. The more you cut off, the less work the router has to do on the next stage, which makes it safer. One technicality, just something to think about, is that always let the blade stop before you pull it out. You may not see me do that, but I'm recommending that you do it, and the reason for that is that you want to pull it out on the same trajectory that it's cutting at. If you try and pull up or you've twisted it or anything like that, it won't come out. Now, you want to do it once it's stopped, because if you do that while the blade's moving, the jigsaw is punching up and down, and if you hit that wrong, it's going to come back and punch you in the guts. So let the blade stop. Always start the blade off the job. So what I'm not doing is butting it up against there and starting. It will work, but generally what you want to do is start the blade a couple of mil back at least, let it get up to speed, and then feed it into the work. Now what I'm going to do is do a pass, which is probably more, or probably closer to what you're going to do at the start, which is something like this. And that's okay. That's just how it is. It's just more meat to remove with the router, but what you can come along and do is feather it in. If you push in this way, the blade's going to follow the trajectory and you're going to cut into the board, so just feather it in. Okay, so we've chopped off the bottom deck, we're going to start the top deck. Now with the top deck there's a bit of roll. So instead of the base plate being square on the edge, which you can cut it like that, you're just going to cut it really high. What I do is actually tilt it. So the base plate is going to sit on the edge of the board like that. If you want to, sorry Jono, it's going to sit on the edge of the board like that. So I'm going to cut along the deck roll. So at some stage Jono will get a quick shot down the side here and you'll be able to see it. But what I'm going to do is just roll it around. Now that's going to change when you get to the nose, because the aesthetic of a surfboard nose is that it wants to go upwards. So when we get to the nose, this is actually going to invert and go around like that. Hope that makes sense. You'll figure it out. Most important, basically I'm just going to cut it on a bit of a bevel, again watching the height here and the height of the tip of the blade on the board. Okay, so what we're going to do next is trim off this excess around the rail, so you can see that most of it is gone, but we're going to use the flush cut router bit to basically come along that edge and bring it back pretty close to flush. You want to make sure that you're not doing it on too much of an angle. You also want to make sure that you're not cutting in between the blade and the bearing. So the bearing guard here, again, the thing you don't want to do with this is create friction. If you get friction in that bearing and it seizes, it will explode. So you want to make sure that your blade's cutting through the depth of the rail and that your bearing's sliding along it. Now, when we put the rail on, there was a couple of pins that got a little bit too close to the deck. If you hit those with the router, they're going to fly out at about 30,000 RPM. So they're going to be like little bullets. First thing we need to do is just pull those out. So what I do is get an old chisel, make sure they don't break inside the board, and just lever it out. Don't pull it out, don't twist it, lever it out. If those bits get stuck in there, you're really asking for trouble. And don't poke the chisel into your hands if you use a chisel. So I'm just going to roll this out backwards, and that's going to pull it out. You don't want to bust it inside there. Okay, now again, the spray with the router is up this way. So whatever's going to come out is going to shoot around this way. So the safest place to be is on the other side of it. The most unsafe place to be is wherever you're standing when you're cutting. Okay, so I'm going to do the top deck first. It's your choice if you do the top or the bottom deck. On the top deck again, what I'm going to do is bevel it. So on the bottom we'll have the base plate square and flush to the rail, so it's a nice clean cut. But what I'm going to do is bevel it along that deck roll, and again invert it when I get up to the nose so I don't take off the aesthetic. I'm plugged in, we've got our PPE on, let's get cracking. Again, you don't want to start it on the job, so you don't want to whack it on the job and start the machine, because if this bites or grips, it could throw the machine with the torque that it creates. So you want to start it off the job and slide it down. Okay, so we've just trimmed it off, and as you can see there is a lot of dust. Now you can hook up a vacuum to your trimmer and stuff like that. I find it's actually more dangerous for myself to try and negotiate that cord or the tube and a vacuum buzzing and stuff like that. So for me it's safer to just do it how I did it, and to use the tool correctly and safely. If you're going to be a cowboy, you're putting yourself in the firing line, don't do it. Just take your time, be safe. If there's a bit of dust, wear your PPE and stuff like that, but just make sure you stay safe. It is the most dangerous thing we do in the board build, and as you see holding the router, you are in the firing line. If you don't follow the instructions, or you try and do an experiment when you're building your board, you're asking for trouble. Don't let friction and heat build up in that bearing. Make sure you keep moving. That's it. So it is a dusty job. What do they call it? Shed glitter. So I've got my shed glitter on, ready for dumplings and a disco, but just stay safe. So we've got one more little router trim to do, just to put a little half round on it. We don't do any shaping at all with power tools, everything's done by hand. This is really just a cheater to take off about 15 minutes. So we'll do that, and then Jono's next door, but we're probably going to get dumplings first. Okay, so we've got a half round router bit on the end of the trimmer. It doesn't quite fit, so what I've done is taken the base plate off and trimmed the edges off it so it fits in this, so I don't have to use a big router. And I'm setting it to absolute depth at the end of the cut. Now where I'm going to start that cut, this isn't going to do any shaping. It'll get close towards the nose, but it won't do anything finished. But I'm going to start that cut on the bottom, probably about 2.5, 3 foot from the end, and that's so we can actually shape in this functional rail towards the edge. This needs to stay sharp, otherwise the board won't work correctly. So I'm going to start that from here and finish it here. So we've just finished doing the routing. You can see that Jono's board is looking sweet as a button. So we're ready for the hand shaping. So everything gets done by hand now. There is no tool, there is no router bit that will create the correct shape the whole way through. A surfboard is super dynamic in its shape, and what we're going to do is go through how and why a surfboard works associated with that shape. So everything's on the other side of the workshop now, which is all hand tools. So are we getting dumplings?
We're getting dumplings.
We're getting dumplings, and then we'll be back. We'll be a bit like this when we come back, but we'll be happy. All right.